Focus on Headline. All right, let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio today, we have Kwon-soa and Cha Yoon-kyung. Guys, welcome back.
Good
Hello,
evening.
guys.
Happy Mondays to you guys.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
It's Monday, and there was a whole lot of things happening over the weekend, so we got a lot to cover here. This starting off with, of course, with the Shangri-La dialogue, which happened over in Singapore. The defense chiefs of a number of countries coming together for talks there. This is where also the defense chiefs, South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, agreed on the launching of a system to share North Korean missile warning data. And this is all the more important if you guys remember. Japan seems to always have trouble getting information on the North Korean missiles because there was sometimes when there was I believe there was only one fired, but they said it was like two fired, and there was a kind of a mishap with the information on the North Korean missile system. They've always kind of requested that South Korea request the information on that. Back then, of course, tensions were still high between the two neighboring countries, but now that everything is very friendly, we have an agreement here. So you're going to start us off.
Sure. South Korea's Defense Minister Jong-sup and his U.S. and Japanese counterparts, Lloyd and Yasukazu Hamada, got together on the occasion of the Shangri-La Dialogue, an annual defense summit that concluded on Sunday. The three defense chiefs agreed to launch a three-way sharing of real-time data warning of North Korean missiles. It's a follow-up agreement made by the three countries' leaders in Phnom Penh, Cambodia in November last year, at the sidelines of ASEAN-related meetings. Now there, President Yoon Suk-yeol, President Joe Biden, and Prime Minister Fumio Kishida had decided to, quote, intend to share DPRK missile warning data in real time to improve each country's ability to detect and assess the threat posed by incoming missiles, calling it a major step for deterrence, peace, and stability. Now, at their trilateral talks by the three defense ministers in Singapore on Saturday, the three agreed that this will happen this year. So a time frame for the launch of such system has been set for the first time. The planned system is expected to make it possible for Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo to share missiles launch points, flight trajectories, as well as estimated points of impact. Seoul's Defense Minister Jong-sup told reporters after the meeting that there are discussions underway on linking the data sharing system between South Korea and the U.S. and the one between the U.S. and Japan to enable the real-time sharing among all three nations. The three ministers also welcomed the recent normalization of the South Korea-Japan General Security of Military Information Agreement, or GSOMIA, and saw eye to eye on the importance of building defense-related trust between countries in the region.
That's right, and not to mention with the normalizing ties between the two countries in South Korea and Japan, what we also saw was the two countries holding the bilateral defense talks for the first time in 3.5 years. One of the things that we were talking about in order to fully normalize the ties between the two countries, we had the historical issues as well. But Japan also kind of brought up, if you guys remember, the patrol plane issue some time ago, where they accused the South Korean Navy of locking in on one of the patrol planes. There was a huge conflict in regards to this. Even despite the normalizing of the ties between the two countries, Japan kept on bringing this up, said in order to fully normalize defense agreements, they need to get this done and over with here. Seems like they have discussed measures in kind of avoiding or preventing occurrences of that patrol plane conflict. You're going to give us the details of that.
That's right, SJ. South Korea and Japan have decided to come up with measures to prevent a recurrence of patrol plane conflict, the biggest obstacle to defense exchanges between the two countries. Defense Minister Jong-sup told reporters after meeting with Japanese Defense Minister Yasukazu Hamada on the occasion of the 20th Asia Security Summit, as known as Shangri-La Dialogue, in Singapore on the 4th. The bilateral meeting between the defense ministers of Korea and Japan is the first in about 3.5 years since the meeting between Minister Chung Kyung-do and Defense Minister Taro Kono in November 2019. The Ministry of National Defense explained as the leaders of Korea and Japan confirmed that Korea-Japan relations was on track of normalization and agreed to develop bilateral relations to a higher level. The Republic of Korea and Japan defense authorities also decided to communicate closely to promote security cooperation. As President Yoon Suk-yeol and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida declared normalization of bilateral relations and enhancement of relations through summits in March and May, the defense authorities also seemed to defuse the Patriot plane conflict that has continued since 2018. An official from the Ministry of National Defense said the position of the South Korean and Japanese defense authorities regarding the Patriot plane conflict remains unchanged, but added for now they agreed to come up with measures to prevent a recurrence. Japanese media, including Kyodo News, reported that Defense Minister Hamada met with Japanese reporters after the meeting and agreed to start discussions on measures to prevent a recurrence of the Korea-Japan Raider and Patrol aircraft conflict. Defense Minister Hamada said, quote, "The Defense Ministry's position remains the same as a final view. We discussed it honestly with each other and will communicate closely based on the results of the talks. The Japanese government is in a position that the withdrawal of this guideline is necessary to prevent the recurrence of conflicts."
All right, so obviously with discussions on that front and sort of eliminating any kind of misunderstanding on that front as well. We're going to see finally one of the things that they really need to clear out here. But what about in regards to North Korea's recent launch of their space rocket? Obviously, this is the big criticism from the international community because it does use ballistic missile technology, right?
Yes. Yes, SJ. South Korea and Japan's defense ministers criticized North Korea's recent launch of a space launch vehicle using ballistic missile technology. North Korea's launch of a long-range ballistic missile in the name of a satellite is a serious violation of the UN Security Council resolution, the two ministers said. It is important to further develop security cooperation between South Korea, the US, and Japan to suppress and respond to North Korea's nuclear and missile threats, build trust between South Korea and Japan, and promote exchange and cooperation at various levels, he stressed. The Ministry of National Defense also reaffirmed the importance of an international order based on international norms and rules and decided to discuss regional and global tasks between the two countries which share universal values.
In the meantime, where there was no agreement made was at the UN Security Council, obviously, and this not really a big surprise, obviously, and they got together. They, of course, talked about North Korea's recent attempt to launch a satellite. Again, the big thing here is using ballistic missile technology, which obviously goes against the UN Security Council resolutions against North Korea. But so do tell us more, though, again, not really surprising here.
Right, not a big surprise. The UN Security Council members failed to agree on the North's latest spy satellite test, meaning they failed to denounce it in one voice or agree on a new resolution involving sanctions. And not even a statement came out. The meeting at the UN headquarters in New York Friday was convened 2 days after Pyongyang launched a space vehicle with a military reconnaissance satellite, denounced by many council members as being a violation of numerous UNSC resolutions that are already existent against the reclusive country. And that, regardless of the test's failure that North Korea itself also admitted, along with its vow to make another attempt in the near future. So why was there no agreement made at the council? I bet, SJ, you already know the answer.
China and Russia.
Exactly, because China and Russia, permanent members of the UNSC, were not on the same page as other members. In fact, they blamed the West for North Korea's behavior, especially claiming the US is choosing tension over negotiations with the North. Representatives of the two countries also claimed that Pyongyang's actions are defensive. Now, the recent meeting was requested by the US, Japan, European countries, and South Korea, with them calling on unified actions on the UNSC front. But again, it failed.
Yeah, exactly. But again, a lot of people are saying, well, look, I mean, North Korea kind of botched their space rocket launch, but I believe what one of the, was it John Kirby who I think said it, the Pentagon spokesman, it doesn't matter if it was a botched launch, is what happens is they're still improving their missile technology, and eventually they're going to be able to launch it. We talked to an expert just last week, and even, for example, SpaceX in their first launch, they failed. Even South Korea failed. So, well, partially succeeded, right? We don't want to use fail in the first launch. So they're saying North Korea, although they failed the first launch, it is another step towards to potentially finalizing and really advancing their rocket technology, missile technology, and so forth. So it's still considered a threat, where a lot of people even say that them sending a satellite into orbit is sort of a cover for them to really advance their ballistic missile technology. Now they're able to use the technology and maybe send a rocket even further than what they can do right now. So hence the criticism right now. But
failures actually can be even more dangerous to countries nearby.
Right.
Which is why the IMO recently came out, right? I mean, IMO was kind of complaining about the ballistic missile test in the first place. But you're right. Imagine what would happen if they fail and then it just kind of lands in the middle of the sea somewhere, where a lot of these container ships do go back and forth to different countries here. Speaking of IMO, Kim Yo-jung, right, the deputy head of the North's ruling Workers' Party, and also the younger sister of Kim Jong-un, she was displeased, to say the least, with the Security Council discussion. Said it will continue on the satellite launch without notification to the International Maritime Organization this time. Yoon-kyung, give us the details on this.
That's right, SJ. On the 4th, Kim Yo-jung said, UN Security Council's discussion on North Korea's launch of a military reconnaissance satellite as a sole agenda is a blasphemy and distortion of the spirit of the UN Charter. Kim said in a statement released through the Korean Central News Agency on the 4th, "I am very displeased with the Security Council making North Korea's exercise of sovereign rights into a problem." She stressed that the Security Council's sanctions against North Korea were unfair, adding, "We have never carried illegal sanctions resolutions, and this position will never change." She also argued, quote, "This pressuring, unbalanced situation will not be sustainable forever." She urged other countries not to side with the United States, saying there are many ways in the world to shine their national prestige and ensure safety without being on the side of the United States, and in fact, there are many such independent countries. Deputy Minister Kim said, "We will continue to launch military reconnaissance satellites and respond strongly until the U.S. and its followers feel bored and admit their choices are wrong, and we will continue to do what we have to do without stopping." In addition, North Korea protested the International Maritime Organization's adoption of a resolution condemning the North's missile launch for the first time in history, and announced that it may not notify the IMO in advance even if it fires a satellite in the future. The KCNA said, "As the International Maritime Organization responded to our preliminary notification of satellite launch with the adoption of an anti-republic resolution, we will regard this as the organization's official statement that our prior notification is no longer necessary. In the future, the IMO will have to take measures on its own for the duration of the satellite launch and the point of drop of the carrier," she said. "They will have to be fully responsible for all the consequences." And as we know, North Korea launched a space launch vehicle on April 31st, calling it a military reconnaissance satellite, but it failed to move properly and crashed into the West Sea. Immediately after North Korea launched a military reconnaissance satellite, the IMO adopted a resolution condemning the North Korean missile launch at its headquarters in London, England, for the first time. The Security Council held an open meeting on North Korea's non-proliferation issue at its New York headquarters on the 2nd local time, but failed to agree on an official response due to opposition from China and Russia.
Basically, North Korea is coming out and saying, listen, we are abiding by what the international norm is. That is that we're going to send a military reconnaissance satellite up like every other country, and we're going to let the IMO know. We're going to also let Japan know, because that's going to be like the country that may be impacted by some of the debris or whatever, when they do the separation and whatever falls onto the ocean, it might be near Japan. And so we are going by the international norm, because this is not an illegal launch, and we're doing what everyone did, and we're going to let IMO know. And then IMO responds with the resolution and going, how dare you respond with a resolution? We're just doing what you guys don't even deserve a warning next time. And now IMO is basically on their blacklist right now. And this is, of course, how Japan rolls. But it is going to get interesting because according to, again, some of these satellite imageries that some of these media outlets have been getting, they're saying there's a whole lot of activity right now in the new satellite launch location. I believe that they've moved the location. And so it might actually come within weeks' time is what they're saying. And this time around, there's going to be absolutely no warning. And who knows, maybe we'll get another alert text message in the morning. Moving on here, South Korea upgrading its Veterans Affairs Ministry this Monday from what it used to be sub-ministry level. So do tell us about today's ceremony marking the transformation. And also, what is the significance of this new status?
Well, some of our listeners might not be aware of the fact that South Korea's Veterans Affairs Ministry was actually not a full-fledged ministry, but a lower-level governmental body or sub-ministry level agency. Especially in English, it could be confusing as it had been called a ministry before, and the top official there was also called the Veterans Minister. However, in Korean, it was differentiated as 국가보훈처, whereas ministries have 부 at the end. So now it's the 국가보훈부. Now this Monday, an inauguration ceremony for the Patriots and Veterans Affairs Ministry, which is the full name of it, was held at the government complex in Sejong. It was attended by some 300 people, including Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, other officials, and foreign diplomats. The upgrade of the ministry was one of President Yoon Suk-yeol's campaign pledges. Back in March, in fact, President Yoon signed a bill in approval of the revision of the Government Organization Act, which paved the way for the elevation of the Veterans Ministry. Let me give you some background on this ministry. In 1961, the Act for Establishment of Military Relief Administration was enacted. So it was called 원호청. So that was the Military Relief Administration back then. Now, this was the first time a state agency was established for wounded veterans and families of fallen soldiers. And the status of the agency changed from time to time. And that's attributed to ideological and political reasons of different administrations, as well as due to financial issues. In 2017, for instance, it was upgraded to a ministry, but its head was not given a cabinet member role, meaning it was difficult to turn proposals related to veterans policies into law. However, now the minister is given the right to vote at cabinet meetings and can issue ministerial orders.
All right, so what does this essentially mean from now on? And the most important thing is, obviously, we say it went from sub-ministry level to now a full-fledged ministry. What changes are we expecting from this?
Well, basically, there will be more recognition and appreciation for those who made sacrifices for the nation.
Good.
Minister Bang Min-sik, the first veterans minister of the Yoon administration at Monday's ceremony, pledged efforts to better honor the people of national merit and also promote a climate in society to better support them. Some of the projects known are a plan to create a new park in Yongsan district, Seoul. Yongsan, as we know, is where the presidential offices, to commemorate war veterans and other patriots that will resemble the National Mall in Washington, D.C. And also the Seoul National Cemetery is expected to undergo a transformation into a comprehensive facility dedicated to veterans and patriots, similar to the Arlington National Cemetery, again, in the U.S. And also medical and rehabilitation services will be expanded. They did have those before, but for instance, they're going to have more veterans veterans hospitals or hospitals designated for veterans. And the ministry will also have an increase in the number of employees that will be increased by 26 people to 337.
Yeah, speaking of which, speaking of Yongsan and the veterans, if anyone of our listeners plan to visit South Korea anytime soon, I always encourage you guys to go visit the National War Memorial Museum in Yongsan. One of our listeners' name is Museum. I hate to say this. I'm not a big fan of museums, but that is one museum I've gone more than 3 times now. It is a remarkable place, and there's something very, I don't know. You look at some of these. They even have the remains of one of the fallen soldiers at the museum, and it strikes you very differently. You have this weird feeling about this, and also you get to learn about some of the other countries that fought alongside South Korea during the Korean War, and I always encourage you guys to check it out, and I'm glad that with this ministry now, the veterans and the heroes get what they deserve, and of course the fallen soldiers and the fallen heroes also continue to get the recognition that they deserve as well. In the meantime, President Yoon Suk-yeol recently attended the inauguration ceremony of the Overseas Koreans Agency. Said that the Korean government will live up to the overseas Koreans' expectations. Yoon-kyung, let's get more on this.
That's right, SJ. President Yoon Suk-yeol said on the 5th, overseas Koreans desperately want a window of opportunity for their motherland and compatriot society to grow together, adding the Republic of Korea wants to live up to the expectations. President Yoon attended the inauguration ceremony of the Overseas Koreans office in Songdo, Incheon, earlier in the day and said the Overseas Koreans office is an organization dedicated to overseas Koreans suitable for Korea's elevated status and national status. President Yoon emphasized in the future, the Overseas Koreans office will not only protect and support overseas Koreans, but also serve as a link to promote exchanges and cooperation between overseas Koreans and their motherland. He then said those Koreans who are located abroad are Korea's precious offshore network that extends to the world, adding if 7.5 million Korean networks are closely connected to each other and share the necessary information and experience, overseas Koreans in Korea will grow and develop together. It is the responsibility of the state to take care of the pain of our compatriots wherever they are in the world, President Yoon said, bringing up a meeting with Korean victims in Hiroshima, Japan last month. President Yoon also said protecting the identity of the next generation of overseas Koreans as Koreans and continuing the relationship with their homeland is an essential task for the Overseas Koreans office to carry out. He added, we will provide excellent Korean language education so that second and third generation Koreans can inherit their identity with pride of Koreans and provide programs to visit and experience Korea. President Yoon presented a letter of appointment to Lee Gi-cheol, the first head of the Overseas Korean office, and delivered a signboard of the office building.
In the meantime, the government vowed to overhaul the state subsidy system for civil organizations or NGOs, this following an inspection of thousands of private groups on how they use these state subsidies. A lot of controversies in regards to this. It turns out that many of them misused those government funds. So fill us in on this.
Right, let's start with some numbers here. 1,865, that's the number of illegal spending and corruption cases that they detected. Related to state subsidy projects, that's related to state subsidy projects worth 1.1 trillion won, or roughly $841 million. And the irregularities were worth 31.4 billion won, or 24 million US dollars. So this was the result of the government audit that looked into government subsidies distributed to some 12,000 civil organizations in the past 3 years. The Office for Government Policy Coordination under the Prime Minister's office was in charge of this. The total number of private organizations in Korea is around 25,000. So roughly half of those organizations were subject to the audit. The presidential office made this revelation on Sunday, citing its inspection that it conducted from January to April. So in specific, in what ways was the money misused? Embezzlement, accepting rebates, private expenses, fabrication of documents, insider trading, etc. And those found guilty of these irregularities will face punishments as the government plans to refer these cases to investigative institutions. On Monday, according to a presidential spokesperson, President Yoon Suk-yeol ordered a strong crackdown on corruption involving government subsidies, as well as the complete recovery of misappropriated funds. The ruling People Power Party, meanwhile, urged the government to also kick off an investigation into organizations that were not subject to the recent audit. As I mentioned before, there were 12,000, but there are some 25,000 in the country. The Office for Government Policy Coordination is scheduled to hold a meeting on the inspection results on Wednesday with audit officers that took part in the recent findings, and they will discuss how to restructure the government subsidy system to prevent these abuses from repeating themselves. And I have to say, it's our tax money. This is coming from taxpayers' money. So let's do hope that they will find some ways to overhaul the system.
Yeah, you know what else they're trying to crack down is if you've seen out in the streets of Seoul, you see a lot of these like really expensive sports cars.
Oh,
right, and then so those that are rentals, right? They have the like the heat plates, right? So those are rentals, right? So what they're saying is a lot of these, like I'm talking about, like the supercars, even that have the heat rental status. Basically, they are either, let's say, like a company head's son, right? Basically gets that from his dad, right? His daddy. And then the daddy writes that off as company car. And that's tax deductible because that's company car. Like it's supposed to be, expenses and things like that, which it's not. Giving your son an expensive sports car is not a company write-off, right? And so they're trying to crack down on this. And so any car that is purchased under the company name now is going to have a different plate color.
Oh,
put
interesting.
A neon yellow. Neon yellow plate so that it really stands out and says this is so. Now they're really trying to crack down on this. So but this is even bigger because, like Soa said, I mean, this is our tax money, right? And if it's true, they need to really start cracking down on this.
So Esther, when you said when you started with saying on the street and you were talking about the cars, I actually thought you were going to talk about those NGOs on the street that try to get your signatures for goodwills. But in many cases, sometimes I wonder if they really use each of these pennies for the goodwill.
You have to actually do your research.
I know,
You're absolutely right
sure.
because I forget which companies they are, but there are certain companies where they only donate like pennies on the dollar, and like the CEOs of the quote unquote the nonprofit organizations make millions. And literally pennies. So there's actually a list. If you do a research on it, which organizations don't take any profit, literally any profit, 100% of the proceeds go to whoever you're supposed. There's a list of that. And you'll be surprised which organizations actually take a significant amount of the cut that you're donating. They're big name organizations. And so I'm not going to name them because I might get in trouble for this, but just do your research basically is what you're trying to say. Good point there.
Yeah, so, that's why they should receive, the nation's people's trust, especially after this recent findings from the government.
Right.
Which is why a lot of people, when they do want to make donations, they donate to places directly, knowing where it's going to be used and things like that, right? And so always, you can't trust. That's why you can't trust anybody. Let's move on to international news here. This is really scary here. Numbers are going back and forth. I've heard at least 275. I heard some reports say at least 288. Numbers they're unsure right now. We're talking about the deadly train crash over in India. The railway minister says signal failure led to the disasters that killed hundreds there. Yoon-kyung, give us the latest on this.
Yes, SJ. At least 275 people were killed in a deadly train crash in India's Odisha state. A preliminary investigation found that an error in the entry signal caused the train to enter another railroad, causing the worst accident. A train derailment crash occurred near Bazar Station, Odisha, India, at around 7:20 p.m. local time on the 2nd. The number of deaths has increased to at least 275, and the number of injuries has reached at least 1,000. The governor of Odisha said last carriage work has begun, and so far about 275 deaths have been confirmed by the National Railroad and local police. A probe found that the accident began when the passenger train entered the cargo track and collided with the cargo train, with the rail signal not properly displayed. Later, the passenger train derailed and crossed to a nearby track, and another train on the track from the opposite side hit a derailed passenger car. A witness of the train crash mentioned that the crash entangled the people in the train and hit me, so I was crushed on the bottom floor. The Indian government is working on rescue operations with 1,200 rescue teams and military personnel, and no South Koreans are among the casualties so far. President Yoon Suk-yeol and other world leaders expressed their condolences for the accident. In India, 12,000 people use 14,000 trains every day, and accidents like this are frequent due to outdated signal equipment and poor safety management of old vehicles.
Only 12,000 people use this? I'm sure there'd be a lot more than 12,000 people, because over in India, I mean, you guys have seen photos of how people travel around in India, but they're overly packed is what usually happens. And I think that might be maybe a typo in the numbers there. There's because India is now the most populated country in the world now. And
Right.
just judging by how many people use the train there, I think 12,000 is just way too low there. We'll do a double check on that. Let's shift gears now to the war in Ukraine. Russia is claiming that it's thwarted a major Ukrainian offensive in the city of Donetsk, killing 250 Ukrainian troops, while Ukraine is, of course, looking to get prepared for the counteroffensive to take back some of its territory. So what's the latest there?
Sure. I just quickly checked on Google. I think it might be in the millions, the number of people using the train in India each day.
I mean, even if they say 120 million, I would not be surprised. Or even 12 million sounds very little for a country like India. Even if, honestly, I think it might be 120 million people use that much.
I think it might be 12,000 trains and more than 23 million passengers a day.
A day, 23 million passengers. Yeah, that seems
Don't
more
quote
like...
me on it. It's just what I just saw.
Yeah, let me just do a double check on that
sure.
soon.
So let's now shift to Ukraine. On the morning of June 4th, the enemy launched a large-scale offensive in 5 sectors of the front in the South Donetsk direction. That's what Russia's defense ministry said on Monday, claiming Russia's forces has thwarted this major Ukrainian offensive in Donetsk, killing 250 Ukrainian troops, as well as destroying 16 tanks and other armored vehicles. Ukraine, however, reportedly had no relevant comment. What we are aware of, however, is that a counter-offensive by Ukraine has been long prepared for to retrieve its territory that Russia has aggressively claimed. It's too early to say, though, whether this counter-offensive has begun or not. Ukraine's military just recently reiterated its plea for so-called operational silence regarding the counter-offensive. Why that? To prevent public words actually help the enemy. A large-scale attack from Ukraine to retrieve its territory in the east and south is being anticipated more and more. In fact, officials have recently also been cracking down on citizens that share images and footage of air defense system that brought down Russian missiles. So lots of tension and lots of, I would say, the Korean word 눈치, meaning both sides are trying to, see how their strategies, what they are expecting next. So there is lots of tension, especially for Ukraine's strategy to work, while Russia won't be just sitting back.
Yeah. Very quickly, just an update here. Just some research. About 22 million people ride 14,000 trains across India every day is what it is. Yeah, 12,000 just seemed way too little for...
million.
22 million.
Million.
22 million. Finally, very quickly here, we are running out of time. Singer Kim Tae-han winning the Queen Elisabeth Competition. Once again, enhancing national prestige when it comes to K-Classic. We've been seeing a number of musicians in this field winning a number of illustrious and very exclusive awards. Yoon Kyung finishes things off for us with this.
Yes, SJ. Korean vocalist Kim Tae-han, who is a 22 years old baritone, won the Queen Elisabeth Competition in Belgium, which is considered one of the world's top 3 competitions. Kim Tae-han was selected as the winner of the vocal competition held in Bazaar, Brussels, Belgium on the 4th local time. This is the first time that an Asian male vocalist has won the Queen Elisabeth Competition since the vocal category was newly established in 1988. Born in 2000, Kim Tae-han graduated from Sunhwa Arts High School and studied at the Department of Vocal Music at Seoul National University. He's a rookie who made his debut in September last year's solo concert. The Queen Elisabeth Competition is a world-renowned music competition held in Brussels, Belgium. It is divided into cello, vocal music, violin, and piano, and is held every year in different fields. It is also considered one of the 3 major competitions, along with Poland's Chopin competition and Russia's Tchaikovsky competition. Kim Tae-han is the 5th South Korean and the first Asian man to win this event. In this year's competition, vocal music category was held from the 21st to the 3rd of last month. 64 people made to the finals, and among them, 18 were Korean vocalists, and 3, including Kim Tae-han, Jung In-ho, and Won Kyung-min, advanced to the finals. Jung In-ho came in 5th. Cho Soo-mi, a world-renowned soprano from South Korea, participated as a judge in this competition. Immediately after the announcement of the results, Jo met with reporters and said, "I've won the competition several times, and I'm even more happier now." And Park Bo-gyun, Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism, said this award was intense, that it imprinted the global influence of the K-Classic, adding, "I will cheer with the people for Kim Tae-han's beautiful voice to console more people around the world in the future."
There you have it. Congratulations, but very quick correction here. Amongst the finalists, Kwon Kyung-min was his name, not Won Kyung-min. Kwon Kyung-min.
Sorry, Kwon Kyung-min.
There you have it, guys. Unfortunately, we are out of time here. Thank you very much for your reports. Have a safe one, and we'll see you guys again.
Thank
you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang radio application or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.